Hello, my name is Vaughan Rees and I'm one of the chaplaincy team at the University of South Wales. Welcome to the third in our series of observations during Fair Trade Fortnight. In this Fair Trade Fortnight, we are encouraging each other to look for the telltale signs that give us an assurance that we are being fair when we shop. This can be a bit time consuming at first, but once you get used to it, it really does become second nature. So here are some tips for you. Tip 1 is, have a look at the labels. Look for the label that says Fair Trade, or Divine, or Cafe Direct, or Rainforest Alliance. But if we are trying to be ethical shoppers, there is more to consider than fair trade. As important as the welfare of farmers and farm workers is, there is the big issue of environmental impact, which concerns the welfare of all of us, the world over. So I suppose tip 2 is, you can look for the label that says organic. This gives us the satisfaction of knowing that what we are buying has not entailed the use of toxic fertilizers and pesticides, or that it doesn't poison the ground. But this can be quite a sacrifice because organic produce is often much more expensive. And this, choosing organic food, is not a choice that people on a low budget can often take. So it's understandable that feeding their children now, in this moment, trumps worrying about something that seems less immediate. So tip 3 is, look at how the product is packaged, because we know about the terrible damage that plastic is doing to the environment. Microscopic particles of plastic that are eaten by sea creatures even end up in our stomachs when we eat things like fish. And even if we are vegetarians, the vegetables we eat may contain particles of plastic absorbed from the soil. Tip 4, look at where the food has come from. There's the issue of air miles to consider and the pollution that they bring with them. Should we buy apples or lamb from other countries? Or should we choose the slightly more expensive option that comes nearer at home? But then, even locally produced food is often transported around warehouses hundreds of miles away before it reaches our local supermarket. And what about those green beans that come from Kenya? We think, yes, we ought to support those Kenyan farmers struggling to make a living in poor countries. But then we think of the environmental pollution caused by transporting those beans by plane for all those thousands of miles. Actually, the distance factor is not nearly as simple as it looks. So for instance, fruit and vegetables grown in Britain are very hard on the environment too. If they're out of season, they have either been grown in electrically heated greenhouses with artificial fertilizer or picked months ago and stored in power-hungry refrigerators. By comparison, beans grown in Kenya, fertilized by natural manure, picked by hand rather than machinery, and put straight onto a plane where they don't take up much space, arrive fresh in our supermarkets, having made much less impact on the environment than any home produce at all. The irony, or perhaps we should call it the unfairness in climate change, is that some of the people who suffer most from it, including Kenyans, are those who have done the least to cause it. Next November, Britain is hosting the Climate Change Summit. We will be taking our part in persuading nations all over the world to cut down on the use of fossil fuels and draw back on the way they are depleting natural resources. But many of those nations are struggling to bring their people out of poverty. We in this part of the world have had a head start, and our standard of living is largely the result of the way we exploited the resources of their countries for our benefit, and in many cases still do. Who are we then to blame them now for wanting to catch up? And who are we to blame poor farmers who find that cutting down the rainforest is their only chance of making a decent living? Environmental concern is a bit hypocritical if it's not accompanied by economic justice. For us as individuals today, there are some challenges. We can realise the buying power we have as consumers and educate ourselves to use that power responsibly. We can use whatever influence we have to get governments and companies to create a fairer world. We can commit ourselves to wanting to be fair to those who live around us, like those forced to use our food banks, as well as those who live far away. And we can recognise that in the making of that fairer world, we may have to make some sacrifices, consume less, and live more simply. This isn't as complicated as it first sounds. Once we get the hang of it, if we are going to protect the natural world and be fair all at the same time, it will become second nature to us. So it's Fair Trade Fortnight, and perhaps it's time for us to work hard at being fair. Thank you for listening.